Shooting a 600 plus on a 720 is a lot easier than you think. It might be tempting to think you need a perfect release, super clean technique, extremely good tuning and all these other things. And all of that is good. But for a 600 plus, we're not talking about world-class technique yet. We're talking about good technique and not making big mistakes. So I've broken it down into 4 main areas for you. I'm going to outline them now. Then we're going to go through each one. And at the end of the video, I'm going to give you some actions that you need to put in your training in order to get to this level, this 600 plus, if you're not there already. And chances are, even if you are there, these things are going to help you go from 600 plus to 620 plus, 630 plus maybe, and maybe 650 plus. I'll do a separate video in the future on getting to 650 plus because there are different things there, but we're going to focus on this one for now today. So what we're going to do first of all, I'm going to outline them for you. The first one is you must have a good level of bow fitness. I did a separate video on poundage last week. You can watch that if you want. If you go to the Online Archery Academy page on YouTube, you can see that last week's video. But you must have a good level of bow fitness, because that leads us on to point number 2, which is you must be able to get to a good, not perfect, just okay, good full draw position. If your position at full draw is completely off and completely wonky, even if you're quite strong, unlikely that you're going to shoot well. If you're not strong, it's even worse. So you need a good level of bow fitness, a good, not perfect, full draw position, and then you need a decent release. And here's the key bit. This is what most people get trapped on. That's not jumpy. That's not jumpy. It needs to be balanced. And I'm going to show you some examples of what a balanced release looks like and kind of explain that in a minute. And then the fourth thing that you must have is a basic, and I mean basic, tune. Nothing special, nothing fancy, and I'm going to outline what exactly that is as well. So for the bow fitness, this is the first one. I'm going to actually show that by going to this screen here and showing a video of Steve Weiler shooting. Now, this is Brady for now, but Steve Weiler has one of the most explosive releases on the international circuit. But even with that, once Brady moves out of the way, we'll see in a second, even with this super explosive release, you can see Steve Weiler's release is balanced and it's not jumpy. Both sides are balanced on the release. The body doesn't jolt loads around. And this is what's really, really important. You'll see this in a second now when he's about to release. It's super snappy, super punchy and strong, but very balanced. So what I mean by this is we're going to kind of move around a little bit in the order of those 4 points. But if you don't have a good level of bow fitness, it will be impossible to do a release like I just showed, because you're going to be struggling through the clicker. You're going to be at full draw, struggling through the clicker. And if you give your brain the goal of pulling through the clicker, when you get tired, it will find another way to do that. And every time it's got the goal of pulling through the clicker, you will pull through the clicker eventually, but it will be different every single time. And if it's different every single time, then your release is going to look jumpy. The classic kind of example of this I want to show you now. I'm going to move back. But a classic example of this is I'll see someone where they're basically struggling to get through the clicker because they're not fit enough in terms of their bow fitness, and also partly because of how they're getting through the clicker, they need to develop that control. But what this typically looks like is it looks jumpy. So that's the other point that I mentioned, remember, about the jumpy release. So what this looks like, a good release here, if the blinds aren't in the way, but a good release here, you would come up and then on release it would be balanced like this. So both sides balanced, not too much jumpiness in the center of the body. What it looks like if you're too jumpy is you struggle to get through the clicker and you make a sudden movement right at the end that kind of offsets the balance. And what that will look like, often you might see the long rod kind of jump up, or you might see the sight jump up, or you might see the bow in the hand kind of twist. But what that will look like here, if I kind of demonstrate it, is in this position, you're squeezing through the clicker, and then there's this kind of jump. Sometimes you'll see maybe the front arm goes up. Sometimes maybe you'll see that the release is like super snappy, but the front arm is still. Sometimes you might see here, the release side is kind of squeezing through, and then there's like a lurch forward with the bow arm. All these different ways, they're essentially because someone's trying to get through the clicker, and they're struggling to get through the clicker. And like I said before, your brain will find a way to get through the clicker because that's the goal you've given it. But it doesn't mean it's going to be a good way. And even if your sight is perfectly on the middle and you do that jumpy release, your sight is on the middle. If we look, this is the sight here looking through the camera, your sight is on the middle, you release and it goes like that. And then the next shot you do it a slightly different way and you release and it goes like that. And you end up getting this just spray of arrows. So bow fitness, a balanced release, and then also I mentioned about tuning as well, but I want to focus on the full draw position. So the full draw position doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be absolutely perfect alignment. Some people, even on the international stage, have maybe a slightly back bow shoulder, slightly high bow shoulder. A good example of this, actually, if we go to here, you can see Brady's bow shoulder isn't that kind of like classic Korean low bow shoulder that you might think you must have. It's not a must have. Brady's got good alignment, especially with the draw elbow. If we were looking from the other angle, he's got good alignment, don't doubt it. But my point here is you don't need to be perfect. You need a decent full draw position. So we've gone through those points. Let's summarize them. We've got basic bow fitness, a decent full draw position, and also a decent release that's not too jumpy. So how are we going to train that? How are we going to train that? The thing I want to leave you with today is one of the simplest and easiest ways to train that is not shooting, is by doing simple bow training. There's some simple bow training you can do that trains all of these things at once and is going to help you get, this is probably the easiest way to go if you're shooting from 500, 550 even to 600. This is the easiest way to do it, which is simply bow training. 30-second hold. So you come up with an arrow in the bow. You can do it without an arrow if you're indoors, but ideally at a target. You're not going to shoot, but at a target in case you release. Arrow in the bow. You come up, you draw up, and then you expand. So you're holding for 30 seconds, but you're not holding static. You're doing a very slow expansion as you hold. And the arrow pulls through the clicker and clicks, maybe after 15 seconds, for example. And then you just squeeze very slightly through. 30-second hold, 30-second rest, and then repeat, ideally 30 times. And this will take 30 minutes. 30-second hold, 30-second rest, that's 1 minute. Repeat 30 times, that's 30 minutes. If you do 30 minutes 3 times per week, maybe Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, whatever, if you do that 3 times a week, this is going to make a massive difference. Because if you think about this, what has this trained? It's trained the bow fitness part. That's one of the things we mentioned. It's training the full draw position part. There's no way, even if you're very, very strong, you can't hold for 30 seconds in your full draw position if your position is that bad. So indirectly, by doing this, you're training yourself to get into a good position because you won't be able to hold otherwise. And by doing the expansion, and particularly by pulling through the clicker, and as you pull through the clicker, you must not flinch at all. You don't want to be pulling through the clicker and then flinch like this. By pulling through the clicker during this drill, during the bow training, and then coming through and keeping that expansion past the clicker, you're also training your mind not to flinch on the clicker. So you're helping that release part. Obviously, you're still going to then shoot when you're doing your normal training. You're still going to shoot and practice the actual release, and we've got drills for that as well that you can see on the website. But this full draw, this is why these bow training full draw holds are such a staple for so many archers worldwide. And I guarantee that 95% of you watching don't do bow training like this. It's so simple to do. And this is what I mean. If you're trying to get from 500 or 550 to 600, it's super simple. But a lot of people don't want to do it because it's not easy. It's hard physically, but it's very, very simple. I know some of you are watching now and you're saying, okay, that's great, Ash. I can't hold for 30 seconds and rest for 30 seconds and repeat for 30 times because I'm going to die. That's really, really hard. And you're correct. So the way to do this is you need to pick a weight that you can do that with to start and then increase the weight gradually. For example, maybe your main bow at the moment is 35 pounds. Maybe you can hold for 30 seconds with 20 pounds. What this will do is it means you get the amount of volume that I was mentioning. You can hold for the 30 seconds, rest for the 30 seconds and repeat 30 times ideally. If you can't quite do 30 even at that poundage, maybe you can do 20 times. But what this allows you to do, because of the poundage is light, you can then make sure your technique is good because you're not being manipulated into a horrible position by poundage that's way too heavy. You can progressively go higher and higher in poundage over time while doing these bow training drills. So you start at the poundage you can manage. If you can't hold your bow for 30 seconds, it's too heavy. Simple. It's too heavy. You need to be able to hold minimum your bow for 30 seconds, ideally in this drill that I've just mentioned about in the bow training. So this is something to work towards. Now here's the thing as well. We'll get onto the fourth point about tuning in a minute. When you're doing this bow training, I cannot emphasize enough how much I want everyone that's watching this, if they just did this 3 days a week, 30 minutes, 3 days a week, honestly, it would change your shooting massively. You're learning all the points that I mentioned, and it's going to massively improve your shooting. If you really want to do it even better, what I'd recommend is maybe splitting the bow training. The first half, so maybe if you're doing 30 sets, maybe the first 15 sets, doing them with your fingers. So you've got your tab, you've got the arrow in your bow, ideally aiming at a target, like I mentioned. Do them with that, with your fingers, pulling through the clicker. Then, on the second half, you're going to be more tired. You're going to start getting tired in your forearm and your grip especially. Then do the second half with your fingers not on the string, using a shot trainer or foremaster or whatever you want to call it, but basically pulling from the elbow. Because what this is going to do, if you watch a video, so here, if you watch a video of any top archer, when they come around with their draw shoulder, watch Brady here when he comes around with his draw shoulder. His draw scapula comes around, and see how far this comes around, and it still squeezes round, squeezes round, squeezes round. His elbow line through the draw elbow is incredible. If we were watching from the 6 o'clock view, the view that way, as my chair breaks. But now watch Steve as well. This is even more apparent on Steve's shot. On the next one, I zoom in, I think, a bit. Here we go. So this is just incredible. Look at Steve's draw scapula here. Coming around, really visible, and then through the expansion, squeeze, 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 really strong coming around with the draw scapula and on release as well. So what doing the bow training with the shot trainer is going to teach you is to lead from your elbow, to bring your elbow round, because that's what you're pulling the bow with, to not over rely on the hook and to grab and use the arm and the forearm too much. And it's going to teach you to bring that scapula and that shoulder blade around and continue squeezing around and really use that through the shot. So if you combine this bow training with the fingers and with the shot trainer, it's going to work wonders. So there you have it. That is how to shoot a 600 plus in terms of what I would recommend you do. The fourth thing that I haven't fully explained about yet is the tuning. Before I do though, I almost forgot. Last week's video I forgot right till the end. If you have a look here, so I'll open this up for you. If you've not checked it out yet, go to onlinearcheryacademy.com. I send a free weekly newsletter. I'm sending one out later today actually. So with some tips in it you can get here. Put your email address in here if you want a free weekly newsletter, because you don't have to pay anything. Great tips in there and everyone loves it. So that's the first thing. If you've not checked out my courses yet, what are you doing? You need to check them out. I know it's Black Friday, but I don't do Black Friday sales. The courses are the same price throughout the year. So you can check the courses out anytime. I'd highly recommend you do. If you use the link on my website, you get a little discount as well, 20% off. And finally, you can also click Become a Member to join my community, which is on Telegram at the moment, where I do exclusive videos, Q&A sessions. You can send your Q&A questions in for me. You get some feedback sometimes on specific equipment things, technique things. There's loads of stuff in there. You can join, you can click Become a Member, read about that in your free time as well. But back to the tuning, the final kind of point here. When I say basic tuning, I mean a basic tune. You don't need to worry about almost everything. All you need to do is get a relatively straight bow. The limbs are relatively straight, not perfect, relatively straight. Have your center shot so that the arrow is very slightly left for a right-handed archer. This is all detailed on my website on the bow tuning guide if you want. You can go onto onlinearcheryacademy.com, equipment, how to tune a recurve bow. The whole guide is there. You only need to worry about the start bit, essentially. It's going to load up. But this is showing about the limb alignment here that I was mentioning. This is showing a basic setup. And then we scroll down. All you need is this. And then the bear shaft test. All you need, that basic limb alignment. And then you need the right poundage, the right arrow spine and the right arrow length. If you just get at 18 meters and 30 meters, your bear shaft in the group, roughly, within whatever your group size is. For example, if you're in the gold at 18 meters, normally, get your bear shaft in the gold and you're fletched in the gold. If you're normally within the 8 at 30 meters, get your bear shaft in within the 8 and your fletched arrows within the 8. That's enough. This is 600 we're talking about. We don't need fancy tuning, even to shoot 660 plus. That's probably going to be enough, that tuning. You don't need to worry about doing button tension tuning. You don't need to worry about doing walk back tuning that much. It's super, super simple. If you've got the bow fitness and the non-jumpy release, you won't have any issues with clearance and stuff like that. So you can just have the general bow tuning and you're in a good starting point. If you want to check things more, obviously you can do, further things, but most of the time it's not worth it. So that's what I want to leave you with today. I hope the video is useful. I want to hear, let me know in the comments below. I want to hear, try the bow training, see how long. I just want to hear how long can you hold with your current weight bow. So draw up your normal weight bow and hold. Can you hold for the 30 seconds I mentioned? And if so, how many sets can you do? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in next week's video.